Looks like we lost Bob.
Yeah.
Christian.
I don't know what happened. Let me see.
We had a power outage, so they're probably still trying to get in.
Really, just now?
Yes, just now.
Oh, okay. So no problem. Maybe let me think what we could do instead.
Bob suggested that people introduce themselves and just say how they're involved with climate health.
Yeah, that would be great. I think we can start with that. Maybe for those that want, can put on their cameras as well, and we have a little overview who's here. So maybe, yeah, Trish, you can start.
Okay, hi, I'm Trish. I'm a climate change and health academic at the Heidelberg Institute of Global Health in Germany, and I've been working since about 2015 on education for sustainable healthcare, mainly integrating it into the undergraduate curriculum for nurses and midwives at Monash University, but also being part of the AMI consensus statement, which is the Association for Medical Education Europe. And I'm also a member of ClimMig Health, who's also running this webinar.
All right. Let's continue. Maybe Andrew Ross, could you briefly introduce yourself to the group?
Hi, so I'm Andrew Ross. I work at the Family Medicine Department at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. I enjoy nature and stuff, concerned about climate issues. Haven't really been doing anything in terms of education and climate issues. So I'm sort of trying to get on board and learn what could be done, what might be done, what others are doing, maybe what we might be able to do at UKZN.
Thank you. Thank you for introducing yourself. Then, oh, I think Bob is back. But maybe we could do a quick round. James, please go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for this invitation to present. I'm a senior lecturer in the Division of Environmental Health at the UCT Faculty of Health Sciences, and I'm currently working on a PhD in education for sustainable healthcare. And since July 2021, I've chaired the new Education for Sustainable Healthcare Interest Group within the SAHI organization. That's the South African Association of Health Educationalists. Now I'll tell you a bit more about that later.
Great, thank you.
Welcome back, Bob.
Bob and Christian, welcome back.
Sorry, we just had the low shedding.
No worries. Should we give you a little more time to get back installed? We were just going to do a quick round of everyone here on the call, a quick introduction round. But maybe we can keep it really short. So I see the next here is Glenys Ross.
Yeah, start with Prof. Bob, if it's a quick introduction. So Prof, should I introduce myself or start with Prof. Bob and then I'll go with the presentation?
Well, I think we just started a quick introduction, so maybe we can continue this, or let's see, you share your screen. Why don't we just do like this? Maybe you can put your name, who you are, and indeed where you work, and interest in planetary health in the chat. And then we can get started with Christian's presentation so we don't lose too much time. So please do so. And Christian, I will let you start with your presentation.
Good, thank you. Thank you so much, Charlotte. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christian Lukutula, Christian Lueme Lukutula. These are my first name and surnames. So I'm a lecturer here in Stellenbosch. I'm lecturing planetary health. So what is the importance of planetary health for Africa? So today we are living in the Anthropocene era where human activities from industrialization, productivity, and agriculture activities human activities have impacted on the environment, leading to disruptions of the natural system. And human health is really impacted, and the effect of climate change are really harming the world. And the toughest vulnerability experience will be here in Africa or in poor countries, where we get more vulnerable people. So, okay.
Sorry, could you put the presentation? Oh, perfect. I'm presenting.
Sorry, thanks, Prof. Bob just came in the office to let me know that I was not on full screen.
That's perfect.
So just, I was saying that we are living in the time where human activities has really destroyed the natural system of our planet. The ecosystem is totally disrupted, and this has impact on our health, human health, health of animals, and we can also say health of the vegetations. So the majority of the people in Africa will suffer from these environmental disruptions because of the economic and social conditions that we are living in. The majority of the people live in extreme poverty, and it's not easy to find that people can easily cope with this ecological crisis. In Africa, people used to live in the forest where you have a shadow, but now we are noticing this kind of deforestation. We are destroying the forest because of our industrialization or anything that we need to do with the trees. So we are living in a time where drought is really increasing in Africa, and people are really suffering from death. This is the kind of environment where Africa is experiencing the global environmental crisis. Drought is one of them, and hunger is one of the things. Malnutrition, I want to say, is really quite tough here in Africa. It's quite easy to see these kind of pictures as you're moving around Africa. So we are having the question of pollution. When we talk pollution, global pollution, in Africa, it sounds quite different. The main issue of pollution is household pollution. As you see the woman cooking there, this is where we are getting more pollution, because most of the countries in Africa may not have the huge amount of industries as we can have in the global north. Africa is living with the agriculture, where ways of doing the agriculture is burning the forest, for example, burning the forest to make the forest having more nutrients for the next harvest. So this is how we are contributing, how Africa is contributing in the global pollution. Of course, there are also some industries in different countries, like South Africa is really contributing in the global pollution. But we don't have only the issue of air pollution. We have the issue of water pollution, soil pollution. Water pollution is really one of the environmental crises here in Africa. It's quite easy to see different rivers full of plastics, full of waste, and we don't do something with, to cure, to help cleaning the rivers, cleaning where we can get water. Industries are really pouring all their waste in the rivers, and there is no clear policy to stop them. So this is the environment of Africa, where beside the natural disaster, we are having the social economic disaster, but this natural disaster can come to what we call the climate migration. I just give you a picture of what happened in Mozambique. This is the picture at the corner there, this Beira. Look how the whole city was under the flood, under the water. This is the issue of Africa when we talk global global crisis, environmental crisis, the ecological crisis in Africa, they mean this for us. They mean this extreme drought. They mean this surprised flood that let people fleeing from their places, moving to other places. This is climate refugees, climate migrants who are moving to seek for better life somewhere else. But although we have this environmental crisis, the link between the global environmental crisis and the impact of the burden of disease in Africa is not clear. This is one of the problems. And planetary health is coming as an opportunity to try to look around and find a solution to this problem. Another problem is the potential, contribution of health industry itself to the environmental crisis. The carbon footprint, water footprint, waste and transport, building, etc. These are different contribution of the health industry in the pollution of the pollution and the destruction of our environment, the global environment, but also the closest environment. This is one of the problems. So, beside those two problems, it's quite easy to see that there is a huge undocumented effect and the impact of the ecological disruptions. If you go in different settings, it's not easy to find data on the impact of climate change and some of the human health. It's not quite easy to find those data. So one of the reasons is that there is no clear policy to let people build those big data to inform people to help tomorrow for any research. There is not enough initiatives and there is quite lack of environmental stewardship in different aspects, not only in the health sector. So these are the problems that I think should, by looking through planetary health, we have a response to find an opportunity to try to solve this problem and tackle the environmental crisis, the specific problems of global environmental crisis in Africa. So the rationale of planetary health education in Africa is that there is a need for health professionals to advocate for the change. Through different environmental crises, there is a need that health professionals advocate for the change. They need to promote for universal cover of green health and green healthy hospital and well-being. Health professionals in Africa need to give an African perspective of the global issues. So this is planetary health for Africa, trying to give an African perspective of the global issues. What climate change means for an African may not be the same with what climate change means for someone living in the global north. So looking through planetary health for Africa, we can have that perspective, the African perspective, that there is some of the action that we needed to help the student, undergraduate and postgraduate students, to get the knowledge, the skills and the value, the competences and confidence to promote that universal cover, to promote that green health, and to advocate for the change. Another need of planetary health for Africa is to relate to the global environmental crisis, the climate change, global, loss of biodiversity, to the global warming, to the people's vulnerability, the current problem that people are suffering with from the environmental crisis. This is defining African health problems and the priorities linked to the environmental crisis, and then give the solution that can contribute in solving unhealthy planetary health issues in their living life. So with planetary health education, we can, the students and the health professionals in general should be able to stimulate the transformative actions, oriented and strategies, policy-making strategies that can help the community, the local community, to act as as part of the global community, and as a community that inspire the influence of green civilization in Africa. We're getting there to new technology of communication. We're getting there to, we need to get more of industries around, but with the perspective of planetary health, that's open mind and help to drive some intermediates, some metrics that can help people think deep in the way we can run our civilization. So health professionals will play that vital role. I think with the planetary health, the health professional will play that vital role in the prevention and communication of the effect of planetary health emergency. So health professionals need to act. This is the time. Planetary health give an opportunity for health professionals to act as transformational agents. Those who are telling the story of planetary health, those who will act in the implementation of policies that lead to green health, that those who are acting for green health hospital, because it's the health industry, as I say, is one of the contributors of the environmental crisis. So that's in that context, the relationship between the doctor and the patient present really an opportunity, a unique opportunity in Africa that will try to lead with the leadership and educate the public about climate change. Imagine a doctor telling a patient about the health consequences of planetary health. The patient will take it with more attention, because he's now talking with the person who's really the master of health. This is how we consider, globally, I think we consider health professionals as those who really provide good health to everyone. So when a doctor can build that relationship with the patient and talking about climate change, talking about the need of protecting the environment, the closed environment, talking about the need of planting trees somewhere, this gives really a good education to the people, and that's a leadership. They're playing that role as leaders of planetary health tomorrow, and that they are creating the change, they advocate for the change that we need in planetary health. So with that saying, the master information that I wanted to say here is that there is an environmental crisis. There are environmental crises globally, but those environmental crises, we feel it here in Africa in a different way. So health professionals need to play as advocates of the change. By playing that, they will plan, they will help to build the link between the environmental crisis and the impact that those environmental crises has on health, on human health, and of course, health of the animals and health of the vegetations. At the same time, they will become aware of the impact of the health industries in destroying the ecological equilibrium. So the ecological balance. So we need health professionals to really practice, to play that leadership role. So that, I think the message for me is quite clear. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Christian, for a very interesting introduction on planetary health. Questions from our audience. I think I want to start with this first question. You said a few times that the environmental crisis is felt differently in Africa versus anywhere else in the world. How is that for you, or like how is that specifically? You have some examples? how that is different, and maybe what could be the implications as well if we want to shape planetary health education for primary care professionals. How would that impact it?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Exactly. I think the experience of the environmental crisis is quite different. The global environmental crisis is quite different here in Africa. In a simple way that most of health systems are not prepared enough to respond to the disaster or the impact of those environmental crises. The community themselves are not aware enough of the information on climate change. When we talk climate change, they still ask you what is climate change. So there is there is no deep information in the community. I think health professionals talking about the climate change brings, they can try to fill that gap and advocate for that change by playing themselves as leaders, as environmental students that who can bring really the change. So to me, this is in the health. I will feel it in the community and health system through lack of readiness. We're not quite ready to respond to the questions. I mean, to respond to the impact of environmental crisis.
Yeah, thank you. It's quite interesting, right? Because in the continent, the impact of climate change is actually felt one of the worst in the entire world, but it seems to be difficult to get the awareness there in the communities. Are there, or do you know if there's currently like other ways where citizens get that information or get that insight on what exactly is climate change outside of the potential for health professionals? Do you have any idea?
The community getting that information, I don't have a clear idea but it's quite clear that they start already talking about it on the televisions. Yeah, there are different talks on the television on climate change, a way of really creating that awareness. So this is how we can get to the community. But in the hospitals, you can get that movement already. There is really quite an increase of understanding of what is climate change. The health professionals in general, they are now curious. They would like to understand what is climate change and what are the evidence of the impact of climate change on health, and try now to take the message to the patients. So this is positive, really a good point, and a good, I don't know if I have to say good start.
I see. Nidhi, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Charlotte, and hello, everyone. Nidhi Nagabatla from United Nations University Quiz. A very interesting presentation, and in fact, Charlotte and I were discussing in relation to a different project, similar aspects that apply to diversifying health services in different geographical regions. I wanted to ask you if, do you think even reforming and reorganizing the health services would also be required? For example, the climate change impact on people and communities will be on physical health, if of course they're impacted directly by floods or they're injured, but a lot of it will also be on mental health, anxiety, grief, trauma, perhaps stress. So there could be a requirement of different kind of health professionals or health services. Do you have any insights in seeing the direction of discourse going to filling these requirements and needs?
Yeah, I think I'll just give an example of our university, Stellenbosch University, where I can see the direction of bringing different sectors, different corners of healthcare services, those who are really acting as from the educational aspect, and those who are in the clinics. That collaboration it's widening the space of planetary health and the space of the impact of climate change. Mental health is really one of the vital role, and those who are dealing with mental health are really advocating for change and the impact of disaster on people's life. So they are really that movement of bringing people together, thinking broadly, and bringing that multi-sectoral services of and trying to bring anyone who can participate and bring his expertise from his corner, nursing, those who are in occupational health, mental health. Everyone is participating in finding a way, a message that can help not only themselves as health professionals to get the knowledge and the skills, the necessary skills, but also to have the information that they can give to the patient. So this is already starting in different corners. So I really encourage that coming together and think in different ways of bringing a solution for the environmental crisis. And this is one of the impact of planetary health. I really like it, bringing people together from different corners and find a solution.
Thank you.
I was going to say, Charlotte, that I see that Ashraf Kaji is on the call. He's actually, I think his interest is in mental health and climate change. I'm interested in his comments on this, but I mean, from my understanding, there's very little actual research done in Africa on the sort of mental health consequences of climate change and sort of migration that happens also as a result of climate change and some of the sort of extreme weather events and disasters that we've seen. But I'd be interested if Ashraf's got any comment on pursuing the mental health issues.
Yes, in fact, thank you, Bob. I have been thinking and speaking to people about the possibility of exploring this a little bit further, and especially examining some of the consequences of climate change on mental health, specifically common mental disorders, major depressive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, the latter a consequence of extreme weather events, for example, and then threats to people's livelihoods, precipitating mental health concerns like anxiety and mood disturbance, as we see more and more people move into conditions of impoverishment as a consequence of climate change, and also other events that are taking place even now with the war in Ukraine, etc. And so I'm in the process now of just listening to conversations and trying to talk to different people with a view to eventually thinking about ways in which we can spearhead some of the research in mental health. And the other thing is, I should say, to try to dislodge this binary between physical health and mental health, because there are all kinds of connections between mind and body, not from a new age point of view, but from an evidence-informed perspective. So yeah, this is very much something that myself and colleagues in our Department of Psychology at Stellenbosch University are interested in, as well as folks at the Alan Fisher Center for Public Mental Health, which is a center that seeks to make a continental footprint in capacity building in the field of mental health research on the African continent.
Thank you, Ashraf and colleagues. And Charlotte, if I may just quickly point the attention to some of the participants to the chat box where we have shared an initiative which Charlotte is also a part. We are trying to figure out how to amplify climate services and climate change response. And we'll be happy to participate in collaboration for deconstructing this nexus. Thank you and over.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that.
I think we're also interested in participants here on this call on what your personal experience or professional experience is already with planetary health, and maybe share some insights on where you see the relevance for it, or which angles we could use to implement this in the primary healthcare curricula. If there's someone here on the call that wants to share maybe some experiences or some ideas they have. Because I think there's these two angles there's like focusing on the impact climate change on health, but there's also what is the responsibility of the health services in general as well. So there's like these two kind of pathways that could be implemented in courses to also raise awareness on this topic. And indeed, like mental health is a big issue that is probably also under-researched. We're curious to know if there's like other topics within the planetary health kind of umbrella that you think would be like a good starting point to implement or to use for future curricula.
I think this also another good question. The transdisciplinary aspect of planetary health is really opening to different disciplines and not only expecting relevant information from other disciplines to complete each other's, but in the way that it's helping other discipline and other sector to be aware of the issue of environmental crisis, global environmental crisis, not only climate change, but it's also the global warming. It's also loss of biodiversity. So different, species who are really going to the extinction today. These are different issues that we get through planetary health. So planetary health is opening on multi-sectoral approach of acting by bringing the other disciplines, but not only health, but other disciplines around health to try to participate and act to reconstruct the ecosystem, the natural ecosystem, and protect the whole ecosystem as we are protecting our own health. So this approach is impacting in different services. We can see it when I talk with doctors. The need of advocating for that change is there. They are really aware of how we can talk about climate change and health impact. Here we have one of the good example, the Heidelberg Hospital was one of the hospitals where you could see a dry area without really vegetation around. But there is this movement of people coming together from the education perspective, the clinical perspective, and even outside the clinical with the Green Pop, coming together to build like, rebuild the environment, the ecosystem around the hospital. This is an impact of planetary health, and people become aware of the impact of the environmental crisis. So seeing planetary health moving in terms of awareness, it's really moving. In terms of advocacy, it's really moving. And environmental leadership is coming because they act really as leaders from the health sectors where they are working. So there is really a light coming. So the sun is rising. So we.
I might want to ask Professor Jennifer Chips. I see you put in the chat that are you doing a PhD in impact of climate changing nursing?
Apologies, no, not me.
Okay.
We have a PhD student who is our first PhD student who is expressing an interest in looking at this specifically. And I think it's a very new area for her. So I think I think a lot of the things that have been mentioned is really very interesting and exciting to look at. And I was just actually busy texting my colleague who's also on here, Talita Crowley, Professor Crowley, because she's in charge of our primary care program at our university, and she will also be a co-supervisor of the student. And I was just busy texting her, sort of saying, I can see the PhD beginning to shape, because I think, there are issues that have been mentioned around the knowledge, the attitude and practices of primary care nurses. And there's been issues around disaster responses, and I think specifically also the issues around, the climate grief. I think I'm beginning to see kind of what she should do. She was hoping to be here, but I don't see the student actually present. We also have another person from our school here as well, which is Juliana Willems, who's, so we're also looking at where this would go into our undergraduate curriculum. So I don't know, Talita, if you maybe want to comment on something, or Juliana. Apologies for no camera. I've got lots of noise and people in my house.
It's interesting to hear that you kept like a bit of a team that's all focusing on nursing this specific topic. Yeah, we'd be interested to hear more about how you'd implement this in the undergraduate curricula.
Yeah, especially since we're busy with a new curriculum, and the new curriculum has very much got a primary care focus. And Prof. Crowley, who's here, Talita, is also responsible for the micro curriculum for our fourth year. So this is also why she's attended today. Thank you.
Yeah, don't know if they're on the call to share maybe a little bit about that with the group.
Talita, if you maybe want to just add something, because I can see that you're here.
Yeah, I also see Juliana.
You can see
Juliana just told me that she's busy learning.
Oh, I see. Because it's one of the topics. There's Wonka Environment developed like an online course for family doctors, but also more specifically primary care. But in the nursing professions, there's definitely a need to also really start to implement this and think about it and what their specific role could be. So it would be great to kind of connect with you more and learn a little bit about what you're planning to do.
Yes, I think it would be very exciting, because I was thinking as well that because in South Africa as well, we've just started with they are going to bring in CPD, compulsory professional development training for nurses as well. And so I was thinking that one of the things that I thought that might be really beneficial is if the PhD student actually develops a program, a short course that we can offer to nurses, and that it can also be integrated into our primary care postgraduate diploma as a module, but it also can, as a standalone CPD course where we can target nurses for CPD training, which I think would be very, very beneficial. So we would be very keen, I think for us, and, as Juliana was saying, it's new for us. We're all aware of climate change, but the impact on education is new, and thinking about how to integrate it into the undergraduate curriculum and the postgraduate curriculum. So I think, the links we make today and the connections are very important for our continued participation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Christian, you want to add anything to that? Otherwise, I go to Laurel.
No, I think I wanted just to say, you'll notice that when we talk planetary health and the impact of planetary health in different health sectors, it's quite clear to get the aspect of awareness. And many people are aware, or we're trying to raise that awareness so they get the knowledge of what is climate change. The Wonka course itself is more giving the knowledge on different aspects of environmental crisis, climate change, heat wave, water crisis, and so on. So these are the knowledge that health professionals need to get so they can be quite equipped they have much knowledge to understand what is those environmental crises, then learn about their impact on health. So they are at the second stage, maybe developing more evidence-based research on what are the really impact of climate change, impact of heat wave on health, and really bring different analytical research that can demonstrate that. This is quite important, and this is coming. So bringing the global environmental crisis on our health system, and through make them understood by the health professionals. This is quite thing. It's something that we really need to work on it, and it's really moving. So there is a good impact.
Thank you, Laurel.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And thanks very much for convening this webinar and also for inviting me. I want to take a little bit of a different perspective and in a way maybe share some thoughts from someone who's been, as I put in the chat, teaching and debating and trying to incorporate third generation rights, solidarity rights, environmental rights, green rights into health and human rights education for health professionals from the late 1990s, and actually designing and delivering course content from 2001. And I know that the kind of mental health aspects have been raised, but I want to kind of take that one step further and maybe look at the way that we've been teaching this. And even what Christian said now about knowledge, I think that obviously we haven't been very successful because this is not about cognitively what we know. And I think we really need to address things like privilege, entitlement, notions about individuality, as opposed to solidarity and communitarianism, because, you know, the idea really, we wouldn't be in this situation if we all had adopted on a deep visceral level on our day-to-day actions, not just what we stand up and preach, but actually what we do in our day-to-day lives about our footprints. I'm not just talking about carbon footprints, I'm just talking about how we walk on this earth and on this planet. So, you know, I think unless we get to that level and we give people information that they need to know about the impact of the climate crisis on health, whether it be physical, you know, mental, spiritual, whatever, unless somehow it becomes deeply ingrained into our DNA that we have this responsibility not only to ourselves, but to each other. You know, to me, it's deeply, and this is my second point, and I don't think you can teach this unless we begin also to confront global capitalism. You know, that we have ended up in this position because of the way that our world economic order is structured. And unless, you know, we realize that we are all beneficiaries, you know, from extractive industries, from you know, from everything that has caused this. And again, I'm sure James will be able to put forward the figures better than I can, but, you know, even if each one of us as humans did something to change our personal behaviors, it still would not make any, you know, it would make a minimal amount. I mean, women cooking be with, say, mangrove forest. Yes, it's destroyed, certainly. It's destroyed many mangrove forests along the East African coast. But on the other hand, nothing compared, to extractive industries along, natural gas or whatever it is along the East African coast. So I really think that this is deeply, deeply ingrained psychologically in terms of the way, Western liberal global North, and more, with class-based differences in the global South as well, that we're entitled and it's someone else's problem. So this is from, really about 25 years of trying to do this. And I think unless, it's more than an academic exercise. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. Charlotte, maybe I can say something on that. Thanks, Prof. Laurel, for this this talk. I think in terms of the knowledge, still the early stage, we need to talk, we need to teach, and this is one of the exercises that we are doing by embedding planetary health into the curriculum. In different universities, it's already coming. I mean, what I know with Stellenbosch University, it's really there. We have tried to embed planetary health into the curriculum, the new curriculum. But there is really much effort to do. I mean, to take it further, not only informing the students, but how to take the information out there so that the community can benefit from the knowledge that health professionals are gaining through this new teachings on the global crisis, and how we can really bring it down to understand our own vulnerability. And this tackles the second issue of the global capitalism and Western capitalism. Yeah, this is really a big issue. And I think, as I said in my talk, the health professionals, through planetary health education, they will act as the transformative, the transformative group. They have to stimulate transformative actions and inspire that transformation actions through the way we have to build our civilization. Should we have to imitate the Western civilization, or we need to build what we call a green civilization? Think of the environmental crisis as we're trying to get kind of needs we get from the forest. But if we can try to plant trees around us. This is a way of reforestation. And it's another way of looking through the Western civilization, which comes with destroying the forest. But if we can plant the forest, this is another perspective of what planetary health is bringing through this education. The next generation will benefit from that, and let the health professionals get that knowledge and spread the knowledge. So I think this is quite important, but I like your approach.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think we can discuss this a little bit further in the next presentations. And it's good to actually see that this is like where we need to start to build this consciousness level. And I would like to continue with the workshop and give Bob Mash the floor, where he will give a short overview of the plans at Stellenbosch University for planetary health education. Please go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Charlotte. I don't think I can claim to be speaking for the whole of Stellenbosch University, but this is more within the health sciences, and particularly in the division of family medicine and primary care. Let me see if I can get this thing to advance. Here we go. So, okay, so what I actually really want to do is just to share with you a sort of a journey that we are on to create in the sort of undergraduate and postgraduate curriculum some material on planetary health. And this slide here is really saying that it's sort of taken us 10 years actually to get to this point, that we've been sort of preparing the ground. And for the last 10 years, actually been working with the faculty to say that as a sort of part of the health industry, we need to be environmentally responsible. And so in fact, the faculty joined this Global Green and Healthy Hospitals movement, as did the Western Cape Department of Health. And we actually developed, which I'm not going to go into the details, like a 10-point plan as to how, and some goals for what the faculty should be doing in terms of its own environmental footprint. And you can see that this included sort of leadership, energy, et cetera, and this kind of, the reason I put this up is that I think this prepared the ground to say, okay, but how do we now include this in our teaching and in our research? So to a large extent, a lot of this work that we've been doing over the last 10 years has been, as I put here, creating a culture of environmental sustainability. And we've worked in a very collaborative way with students and with staff and support staff, so academic and support staff, to sort of like embody this into how you live on campus. So it's not a sort of, so it hasn't at this point been an academic exercise, it's been more about how do we show up as health professionals on campus, and how should we behave in an environmentally sustainable way. So you can see here in the pictures, you know, students have been using eco-bricking to create benches. We've put in an outdoor gym to connect people more into the outdoor environment. We've participated in reforestation events in the Western Cape. And as Christian mentioned, we're now looking at ecosystem restoration in one of our teaching sites at the Helderberg Hospital. So that kind of activity. But then this led us then to say, okay, so one of our goals should actually be embedding this kind of thing into our teaching formally. And the opportunity came up because our MBCHB, our medical student, program, decided to recurriculate, however that word is, and to create a completely new curriculum, which started actually about 3 weeks ago. And in the planning of this curriculum, they used this thing, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, these so-called graduate attributes, one of which, of course, is leadership. And so we were able to then negotiate that environmental stewardship would be one of the aspects of leadership, and in itself, a graduate attribute for our future doctors. So this graduate attribute included this definition. So, our doctors need to understand the health consequences of climate change and other environmental crises and the relationship with health and health inequalities, to apply evidence and management processes to reduce the impact of the healthcare system itself, and to actively participate in initiatives to prevent and solve environmental issues, the sort of advocacy stuff that Christian spoke about. So essentially, understanding the impact on health, understanding the impact of the health industry on the environment, and having an advocacy role. And in fact, the curriculum itself, interestingly, took something of an ecological view of its new structure, and had these 4 elements that kind of like thread throughout the whole 6 years, looking at the self, the patient, the health system, and the community. And this actually created quite a nice framework for us to embed planetary health into. And what I wanted to show you was actually the first 6 new modules. As I say, the first one is sort of 3 weeks old, and none of the others have yet actually happened. But these first 6 modules, which represent the first 3 years of the new curriculum. And just to give you a quick overview, so you're kind of orientated, the first module is called Being and Becoming. So this is an introduction to being and becoming a health professional, in this case, a doctor. Form and Function, which looks at the normal form and function of the human body, of families, of communities, of the health system. You can see those sort of pillars coming through. Health and Wellness, which looks not so much at disease, but at the development of health and wellness in oneself, one's patients, community, and so on. dysfunction, which looks at how these different systems can go wrong, medical detective, which looks at how to assess the dysfunction in these systems, in essence, and interventions, which looks at how do we do something about the dysfunction, how do we intervene. So we then took this framework and embedded into it environmental stewardship as a sort of a golden thread for the curriculum, with specific learning outcomes, or in a sense, questions that we wanted to address, in this case, in each module. So the first module, we looked at, so why is environmental stewardship an issue personally for people on campus, and why is this an issue for health professionals? And then for form and function, we wanted to look at, so how does the form and function of sort of environmental systems, ecosystems, contribute? How do they contribute when they're working properly? How do they contribute and support human health and well-being? And then in health and wellness, we thought to look more at, so what are the co-benefits of actually living a healthy lifestyle and living an environmentally responsible lifestyle? And then coming to dysfunction, of course, we then wanted to look at, so when these environmental systems become dysfunctional, what is the impact on health and disease? And also, how does the health industry, the health system itself, contribute to these environmental crises? Then under medical detective, we're going to look at, so in the community that you are, you're engaging with as a student, in fact, they engage with the same community over the entire 3 years. Now, what are the environmental determinants of health that you're seeing in your community? How potentially do they link to planetary health issues? And how can you assess the environmental footprint of the primary healthcare facility that you've been sitting in for 3 years? And then under interventions, we're going to look, of course, then at, so what can be done to address these environmental determinants of health in the community and potentially on a wider scale, thinking wider. And how can you improve the environmental footprint of your, in this case, primary healthcare facility? So we're trying to thread these 3 elements in a way through the curriculum. How should you be embodying environmental stewardship in yourself as a person and as a health professional? How can you understand the impact of this on health and disease that you're having to deal with? And how can you mitigate in a way the contribution of the health system to the problem? I've given you a couple of very specific examples here. So this is actually some of the learning outcomes we wrote for the first module. So I won't go through the detail, but you can see that we were looking at describing planetary health, understanding or describing the environmental crises, and thinking about personal behavior on campus. So in fact, of course, we had a couple of lectures on this, and actually what I'm more excited about is that we've got all 300 students for an entire morning where we're going to workshop with them on campus what their behavior should look like in relationship to the carbon footprint, use of water and waste on campus. And then under the form and function, as I said, our focus here is to look at how ecosystems support human health, and we're introducing this so-called donut model, which sort of helps to sort of visualize the sort of safe and just space for humanity between sort of an ecological ceiling and a social foundation. And we feel that we need to try and make the connections between development and the social foundation and the ecological ceiling, because so often these are seen as sort of contradictory or antagonistic rather than complementary. So again, we're planning things like a webinar, and then also in their primary healthcare exposure to start to look at some of the environmental issues, and in this particular module to sort of really spend a bit of time with the environmental health officer in the community. So, that's what we're thinking. That's our thinking around embedding in the undergraduate curriculum. And I see that the nurses are also interested, and I'm not sure it'd be interesting to hear how you're thinking about it. We also gave a bit of thought to postgraduate training in family medicine, and initially what we've identified is the opportunity to integrate this topic into what we call community-oriented primary care. So this is obviously taking more of a public health, in a sense, view of the community that you're responsible for, and thinking about the environmental determinants of health that are showing up in that community and linking it through, hopefully, to the planetary health issues. And then secondly, we have also modules that look at leadership and clinical governance. And here, of course, it can also show up again, what does it mean for a family physician, in this case, to be an environmental steward in the health system? How can they advocate for responsible consumption within that system? And how do we actually create a more climate resilient health service, so that when we have challenges, whether they be acute emergency challenges or sort of more long-term and gradual challenges, how do we ensure that the primary healthcare services are resilient and able to continue functioning? So I think that's what I wanted to say, just to give some sort of taste of how we've been thinking about it, and maybe that will also stimulate some of your thinking.
Great, thank you. We're running a bit over time. I think we have time for like one question, and then maybe we can get all the questions too at the last presentation. I think the environmental stewardship kind of aligns with what Laura was saying, that you kind of need to start with building like consciousness about your role as a health professional in this whole debate and the story. So I think it's actually nice to see a bit the thought process there coming alive into practice and what you will try to do. So I think the environmental stewardship is like a very interesting concept to kind of form education around it. So I think I'm also curious to hear a bit more from others. And I see there's a question in this chat from Andrew on how do students measure their carbon footprint?
Well, yeah, there are a lot of various tools around. We actually, I can't remember exactly which one it is, but we've got one that we're going to use with them when we have this workshop on campus, that they will do a sort of bit of an analysis of their individual carbon footprints as a way of entering into that conversation. I can share it with you, Andrew. Yeah. But I think what Laura was saying is very important, and the way I took that is that it's about embodying this issue and the values, in the sense, that go with it. It's not just sort of some sort of disconnected academic exercise. You actually need to engage this as a person.
Mm-hmm. Did you design the modules yourself from being and becoming to interventions, or is that some kind of is that you get the just somewhere else as?
This is why we've employed Christian, because this is one of his jobs is, of course, to lead this through the entire curriculum. And yeah, we've got people around him, such as myself, that are helping to define the learning outcomes, to plan the educational activities. But actually, it's essentially going to be a large part of his job to deliver on this. And it's, we're constructing the curriculum sort of 100 meters down the road from where the students are at. So we'll let you know how it goes.
And so you started 3 weeks ago with the first step then?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, this is great. Unless there's no one question, I think we can move on to James. All right, perfect.
Sorry?
Well, oh, was that you, James?
Yeah, now I'm ready.
Okay.
Just opening my presentation here.
Yeah.
And you should be able to see that. Am I showing you the presentation mode or the?
No, you need to swap.
Yeah, okay, so let me just share that one. There we go. Okay, almost there. All right. So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks again for the invitation to present the key findings of a national audit of education for sustainable healthcare and health professions curricula in South Africa that I did in late 2021 towards my primary PhD research question, namely how can health science faculties produce graduates as agents of change for sustainable healthcare in South Africa. And as I mentioned, I chair the Education for Sustainable Healthcare Special Interest Group within the South African Association of Health Educationalists. And the idea for establishing this group arose after my presentation at the 2021 SAHI conference, where the SAHI board invited proposals for new interest groups, and my proposal was accepted in July 2021. And in my presentation and the proposal for the group, I made these key arguments, which have been well summarized, I think, by Christian in his presentation, but essentially that global climate change is now widely recognized as a growing global health threat and amplified environmental risks to health, but also as a significant opportunity to realize the huge co-benefits from mitigating and adapting to climate change. Secondly, that health professionals have an ethical duty to lead in protecting public health from global environmental change, especially given the high levels of public trust that they generally enjoy. And this responsibility and duty includes minimizing the massive environmental impact of health systems, such as the energy and water and toxic and plastic waste. Thirdly, that Africa is highly vulnerable to climate health impacts, so it urgently needs to build capacity in mitigation and adaptation and advocacy. And this is certainly no less true in South Africa, which is a significant global emitter of greenhouse gases and also highly vulnerable already to extreme weather and to unemployment and deep-rooted poverty. And then fourthly, the healthcare sector has a key role to play in meeting the global SDGs in achieving zero carbon emissions by 2050 and adapting and building resilience to growing climate change impacts. And then finally, there are growing calls for health professionals to be trained as leaders for rapid climate action and environmentally sustainable healthcare. And we saw ahead of the recent COP26 conference, unprecedented advocacy from the healthcare sector. So the figure shown here is from the landmark 2020 consensus statement on planetary health and education for sustainable healthcare by the Association for Medical Education in Europe, which our colleague Patricia will be telling you more about in the next presentation. And this particular figure depicts the relationship between planetary health and indigenous ecological perspectives and the knowledge and values and principles and skills required for practicing sustainable healthcare. And I note that many of these principles are already embodied in the primary healthcare approach. That's been a lead theme of health sciences curricula at UCT for more than a quarter of a century. So education for sustainable healthcare has been defined as the organization of health professions education to develop the knowledge, skills, and attitudes about the interdependence of human health and ecosystems, including the effects of climate and environmental changes on health, and the impacts of health systems on the environment. And so ESH therefore includes mainstreaming planetary health as a transversal curricular theme, as it encompasses the health and well-being of human civilization and the state of the natural planetary systems on which it depends. So that's all from the AME consensus statement, as is this. So this is just a table showing the learning outcomes and suggested learning objectives and some of the learning activities and forms of assessment in the consensus statement, which provided a very good starting point for this study. So I'll present quickly the key findings of the National Audit of Education for Sustainable Healthcare in Health Professions Council in South Africa as the first phase of my PhD titled Opportunities and Barriers to Implementing Education for Sustainable Healthcare, a case study. And I'm using a mixed method design of 3 sequential phases, the national curriculum audit being the first phase, followed by a national Delphi panel of educators to identify priority learning objectives and outcomes and activities. And then finally, a case study of the barriers and opportunities for ESH at the UCT Faculty of Health Sciences. For the conceptual framework of my study, I've adopted the conceptualization, reduction and utilization model for socially accountable faculties by Bullen and Willard. And the three innermost domains you see here, namely conceptualizing the environmentally accountable faculty and graduate, and educating students for sustainable healthcare, and addressing societal needs for environmental sustainability, are situated within a context of healthcare systems and ecosystems that are affected by multiple global climate health impacts that we've heard about. And so I argue that the concepts of health professionalism and social accountability both require faculties of health sciences and their students and graduates to be responsive to the needs of communities and society, and that in the context of global environmental and climate change, the concept of environmental accountability has emerged. And examples of this include effective institutional policies to reduce the environmental impact and educating graduates to mitigate their collective impact on local and global ecosystems and to promote environmentally sustainable healthcare systems. So for the audit phase, a survey invitation was shared extensively via several networks during September to December 2021 to health professional educators at South African faculties of health sciences. The letter referenced the definition of ESH in the AME consensus statement, and the form collected data about all known courses with content about sustainable healthcare, chiefly the course learning objectives and outcomes, types of learning activities, and types of formative and summative assessments. So I'll give you a quick overview of the key findings. 15 of 24 South African faculties were represented, that's about 2/3, 8 faculties by several respondents. Secondly, the responses were received from health professionals representing 9 health professions, 1/3 were medical practitioners, about 1/10 environmental health practitioners, and all describe themselves as being involved in teaching or research, community engagement, or in health promotion about environmental health or sustainable healthcare. More than half of the respondents were unaware of any courses with sustainable healthcare content at their faculties, and only 4 respondents were aware of 4 courses or more. Data on courses with sustainable healthcare content were provided by 18 respondents from 11 of 15 faculties for 20 of 43 potentially eligible courses at their faculties, and course learning outcomes and objectives related to such content were reported for 83% and 89% of the 20 courses respectively. The top 3 learning activities reported were firstly role plays or live patient advice about the environmental and health co-benefits of lifestyle choices. Secondly, writing assignments and oral presentations on sustainable healthcare topics, and community-based research about the key environmental determinants of health. 8 of the 20 courses, or 40%, included formative and or summative assessments of sustainable healthcare content, most commonly oral presentations, so for all of them, individual essays or reflections, multiple choice or short assessment questions, and then student research projects. And then finally, all participants were invited to join the ESH Special Interest Group. 2/3 of them did, and this group is being used for sharing news of local and global developments in education for sustainable healthcare. So just briefly, the vision of the group is a cohort of health professional educators in our faculties with the knowledge, skills, and values to equip future health professionals as agents of change for sustainable healthcare in a rapidly changing context of environmental health. One promising initiative that I'm exploring as a sabbatical project for our faculty here at UCT is the Planetary Health Report Card, which is a student-driven, metric-based initiative to inspire planetary health and sustainable healthcare education and health science faculties around the world. although at present it overwhelmingly represents the global north. And in addition to inspiring the expansion of medical school curricula, the report card hopes to inspire medical schools to expand research efforts, to engage with communities most affected by climate change and environmental justice, to support medical students to organize around planetary health at the institutional level, and to implement sustainable practices on campus, like you've heard Stellenbosch is doing. My exploratory needs analysis of the UCT faculty shows that lots of work still needs to be done. And then finally, I conclude from this first survey of ESH and South African faculties that sustainable healthcare education is starting to develop, despite it being a relatively recent concept worldwide. 43 courses that include sustainable healthcare content were reported by fewer than half of survey respondents, and data on key characteristics were collected for 20 of those courses. The number and variety of learning activities and assessments still appears to be fairly limited compared to the benchmark of the international consensus statement. But there's recognition among respondents of the growing importance and relevance of ESH to teaching and professional practice, particularly in a country like South Africa, which, as I've said, is highly vulnerable to the impacts of planetary degradation and climate change. So in conclusion, the study provides a helpful baseline for further research and curriculum development, and including the next phases of my study, the Delphi panel, and the case study that I'll be undertaking during a process of curriculum transformation in the faculty this year. Thank you.
Great, thank you, James. Very interesting overview of the results. I see Jennifer asked that there are no nurses included in the audit.
No nurses. Yes, there were nurses included, definitely. I can share the institutions, and I think there were about 5 responses from nursing practitioners.
What is the next step now in the process?
Next step, is to, as I mentioned, move from the audit to the Delphi panel. So recruiting panelists to look at, the key learning objectives and outcomes and activities and assessment. So we'll certainly have Stellenbosch pioneering the way here, and then during the course of this year, as part of the curriculum transformation at UCT, interviewing key informants in the leadership and students around particular barriers and facilitators, and probably including the Planetary Health Report Card metrics, as a means of assessing where we are and setting some kind of baseline, and also working with the Director of Sustainability within UCT, who has a proposal to create sustainability literacy courses for all the faculties. So I'm hoping that if it all works out, the health sciences faculty can sort of lead UCT in terms of developing that. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Right. Thank you.
Any more questions for James? Or maybe the other way around, James, do you want seek any input from our group?
Well, if anyone would like to be part of the Delphi, I will send out an invitation about that, and or would like to be added to the special interest group and kept updated with developments, I'll happily add you. So you can just put your name in the chat or email me afterwards.
All right, great. Okay, then we go next to the last presentation, just from Patricia. I think you put a link in the chat, but I'll let you explain everything. Patricia, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Charlotte. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, it's not in presenter view yet, but we can see your screen.
Okay, great. So I might just gloss over my slides and we might go a bit faster to the activity. So just to introduce myself again, my name is Trish Schredler, and I'm at the Heidelberg Institute of Global Health in Germany, originally from Monash University in Australia. And I've been working in the area of research and practice on education for sustainable healthcare since about 2015. And we started by taking the opportunity of a curriculum review to integrate learning objectives on climate change and health into the undergraduate curriculum for nurses and midwives. And I've been working on this subject ever since. We recently put together a consensus statement for teaching health professionals planetary health, which is what I'm presenting today. But I don't want to get too much into the nuts and bolts of the paper because it's been circulated. But rather to use this opportunity to kind of reflect on how we can use this model and adapt it for our own learners and our own teaching environments. Because as we know, as educators, you can never kind of take like a PowerPoint presentation or a teaching plan and just deliver it. We always have to do some level of adaptation. So the AMI consensus statement took us a year, and it was a multidisciplinary, multi-country consultation exercise, which was pretty much putting together a vision for planetary health education. So the plan for now is I'm just going to just show you 10 slides about the AMI consensus statement in the background, just quickly. And then we will go into like a polling activity where we can actually develop some of our own learning objectives. So there's been a wave of enthusiasm for planetary health education, pretty much rising over the last 5 to 10 years. And this has been driven by nurses, doctors, midwives, and public health professionals. And much of it has also been driven by students, the next generation of health professionals. There's been hundreds of articles published in academic journals calling for the integration of climate change and health into our curricula. And at COP26 in Glasgow late last year, over 50 countries signed up to the Healthy Prescription, which is about decarbonising health systems and building climate resilient health systems. And a lot of those countries were African countries. So there's lots of commitment, but is this call being translated into action? We would say no. We would, even at this stage, health professional graduates are not really prepared for their roles to bring about the transformational change that is needed to address the climate crisis. So we have 3 steps. Well, there's 3 steps in building health professionals, as we know, and this is common over all the health professional groups. And a lot of this teaching is very interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary. If you have a look at the working at the learning objectives, they're often very similar. And the 3 steps are, as somebody alluded to before, it's not just about knowledge. First, we teach knowledge and skills to build experts. And then we also teach values to build professionals. And the 3rd step is teaching advocacy skills to create change agents. So, and that's not about like training activists or anything like that. It's about training health professionals that are fit for purpose for the future, because the world is changing so fast. We need health professionals to be responsive, and the climate crisis and COVID is just just 2 examples of how we need health professionals and systems to respond to changing challenges. So I'm just going to give you an elevator pitch for the AMI consensus statement. So the why, what, and how. The why was to provide a global vision for educating the interdisciplinary health workforce to deliver sustainable healthcare and to promote planetary health. In terms of what's in this statement, and it's about 12 pages, but I don't consider it kind of a back to front read that you just read once and you put away. It's a bit more like a resource document. And it's also like a reference document that you can keep going back to. And it's also got a whole lot of references in it that will be useful. In terms of the content, it's got content on knowledge, skills, values, competence, and confidence as well. So, and that's just acknowledging that it's not just all about content and raising awareness and providing the knowledge, assuming that knowledge will be translated into practice. The statement's also got a bit of how in it. So how to actually do this, outlining the changes required in health professional education and the approaches to achieve change. There's also a timeline for action and links with the sustainable development goals, because there's lots of activities. Oh, sorry.
I'm not sure the PowerPoint is still on slide 1. I'm not sure if that's intentional. Maybe
no, it's not.
Just wanted to let you know.
It's funny because we did test it. So I might just keep going without slides. That's okay.
I can also do it, or I can also share my screen maybe.
Yeah, if you do that while I keep talking, that'd be great, and catch up. But it's not really about the slides.
All right.
But if you can, while I'm talking, that'd be good, because I don't think we have that much more time.
All right.
So moving on from the elevator pitch, a little bit more detail about the AMI consensus statement. There's quite a lot of rationale in there. So if you find yourself in a position where you need to make an argument to integrate sustainability into your curriculum, you might want to refer to the rationale around the Sustainable Development Goals. And as Bob mentioned before, the donut model of sustainability. But, and also there's lots of opportunities to use this rationale. For example, as Bob also mentioned, integrating it into your graduate attributes. And or also if, for example, your health facility is reviewing their vision statement, or if your professional body is reviewing their ethical statement. There was an ethical review of the nurses' ethical statement in Australia, and it actually includes environmental stewardship, which is quite rare. That's great. If you just go back a little bit to a little bit more detail. Perfect, thank you. And then a little bit more detail also on enacting the vision. So there's information in this consensus statement about how to engage faculty, because we found through research that although there's a lot of awareness about climate change and health, that a lot of the barriers include not knowing how to teach this content. There's also practical elements to the consensus statement, such as a list of learning objectives and also a table of learning activities and assessment options. You just go to the next slide. So a few examples of the learning objectives. I think as educators, our first thought in developing teaching and learning materials is what learning objectives shall I use? So this brings the abstract into concrete. These are just a couple of samples. So in terms of knowledge, describe how the environment and human health interact at different levels. In terms of values, discuss the role of health professionals in mitigation, adaptation and advocacy. And skills, we ask students to demonstrate how to motivate behaviour change to promote environmental sustainability at the individual, professional and community level. Another point to make is that this content shouldn't really be seen as a standalone or an add-on, because you might find that you get a bit of pushback from students and also from faculty, but rather it should be seen as a lens with which we apply in teaching what we already teach. So for example, on that last one about skills, when we have clinical skills at Monash University, we integrated environmental sustainability by actually integrating into the OSCE assessment the disposal of waste. So we actually assess students on were they really using the materials sustainably, and could they differentiate, for example, between infectious waste, which needed to be incinerated, and general waste and recycling. So that was a way of applying the planetary health lens to our everyday practice. Next slide, please. Just a couple more. I also wrote this paper in Medical Teacher, which you might find quite handy. It's pretty brief, it's only 4 pages. And it's about 12 tips for teaching environmental sustainability to health professionals. I won't go through all the tips, but it's important to connect education for sustainable healthcare to broader educational and professional practice objectives. So as I said before, not a standalone, not an add-on. And inspire students with the co-benefits of mitigation is another tip. So by addressing sedentary lifestyle, unhealthy diets and air pollution, we have the opportunity to both reduce emissions and improve population health. So I'll just go to the next slide. So that's a paper that you might want to follow up with. So what we really wanted to do was flip the classroom a little bit and do some activities now. So if you could just click on that link in the chat and go to polleverywhere.com/healthy-planet. And hopefully then I can share my screen and we'll be able to see the results. But we've just got 6 questions on this content. Can you see that?
Yes.
Great. So the first question we wanted you to reflect on, and feel free to unmute yourself or put your hand up. I'll ask Charlotte to facilitate that because I can no longer see you in answering these questions, or if you prefer just to think about it and enter your responses into the poll, into the live polling link, that would be great as well. So we can kind of multitask here. But the first question is, what is one way that this AMI consensus statement could better reflect concerns of health professionals based in Africa in relation to the climate crisis? So this connects with the first presentation from Christian, talking about how in every setting, in every context, in every population, climate change and health risks are different. So if this consensus statement wasn't global, and if it was for the African continent, what is one way that the statement could better reflect the concerns of health professionals based in Africa? So we're looking for an African perspective here. And feel free to unmute yourself and or put your hand up if you prefer, and just answer this question live as well.
Yeah, or put more in the chat. I see awareness, need to focus on how to build climate resilient primary healthcare adaptation, service delivery, more than mitigation, as the footprint in Africa is relatively small. That's an interesting one. Tools suitable for African communities, right-based approach. Decolonization, how it relates to climate adaptation as an important topic in Africa. I see self-sustainability.
Did anybody want to make a comment at this stage too about the consensus statement generally and how they think it does or does not reflect African priorities or your particular settings? Because it was a worldwide consultation, but we were only able to get one author from Ethiopia on the actual publication. And this is all really useful, whatever you put into the poll as well, because we can collate it and circulate it as like an executive report if you're interested. I think that there should be a single consensus statement that implies global solidarity rather than isolating by region. With that can be embedded the inequities in terms of contributions to the climate crisis. Much wider African consultation needed. We, really agree with that. And maybe that is a project that will come out of work like James's work, where there is a consensus statement for Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to go to the next question now. As I said, feel free to unmute yourself. So one new element the African and primary care perspective can bring to the international discussion on this topic. So I suppose we talked about the African perspective in the last question. This one's more about primary care, because I find a lot of the discussion and a lot of the materials on education for sustainable healthcare are really built for a global north environment and usually a tertiary healthcare institution. So nearly a lot of the materials are kind of based on the NHS model in the UK because they've created such a momentum around this topic. But I do find when we're talking about climate resilient health systems, for example, and we're talking about that with students, there is very little material for a primary healthcare setting, for example. So how do you decarbonize primary healthcare, for example? There's less on that. So is there any element that you could add to the consensus statement from a primary care perspective? Could somebody just expand on COPC and how that would be novel or useful?
Yeah, I'd be curious.
Yes, I put it in the chat because lately for my internship at Climate Health and dissertation, I'm seeing a lot of COPC, and I understand how important it is. And I think that if you can use that vehicle also for empowering care providers to teach whatever they know to patients. So that's why I put it in the chat.
Great, thanks, Thibaut.
Might also be interested in the integration of community health workers, where that actually, or the person who puts that in the chat, what their role could be, or how you would see some integration there.
Yeah, it's a good comment as well that primary healthcare is nurse driven. There is a lot written about how nurses have a unique role in driving this change in health systems for lots of reasons, but just a few off the top of my head. One is the socio-environmental philosophy of nursing, which is more preventative than curative, and also the focus on community engagement. And just the sheer numbers as well, like the fact that it's very rare to have any kind of health facility or health service that doesn't have nurses in it. And also the fact that nurses are the main orderers, users and disposers of medical equipment. So that's a good point there. Community health workers become a part of the evaluation. We might just move on to the next question. Oops. Okay, this might be a useful one for people. Can you right now develop one learning objective that must be included in the curriculum from your perspective for the health professionals in your context? So Bob introduced a few, I mentioned a few from the consensus statement. And I think most of us write behavioural learning objectives. So by the end of the session, students should be able to. Can you complete that sentence for your learners in your context? And if anyone has any questions or comments about the idea of developing learning objectives on planetary health or climate change in health, or any questions, just feel free to ask them now. This is supposed to be like an interactive session, not just a survey.
So Trish, I just wanted to mention we had a new postgraduate intake this today, where I had to give them a presentation about planetary health and also, you know, sustainability. And I was quite amazed to see that none of these postgraduate nurses know much about the topic. They don't know about COP26, they don't know about Greta Thunberg. So we've got quite a far way to go to actually teach them about that before we go into deeper stuff as per the donut model. I'll probably start with the donut model.
Yeah, that's a good point, Cornell. And I think it was Jennifer that raised it before, the idea of bringing something in as CPD as a standalone But I think at the set, which is good for the graduates that have already graduated and are practicing, because there's some argumentation around we don't really have enough time. Like in 2010, we thought we had 20 years to decarbonise, and with the new AR6 from the IAPCC, it's become apparent that we have a decade. So, and because this action is taken so long to eventuate, we actually have to address both active practitioners now as well as the next generation. We can't wait for the next generation because health systems need to transition much sooner than that. So yeah, I think there's the CPD standalone is a good model and a good suggestion, but at the same time, the AMI consensus statement and a lot of the work around education for sustainable healthcare argues that it needs to be mainstreamed. So it's not just one lecture, it is part of our teaching altogether. So in leadership, in clinical, in community health, across the board. So students should be able to recognise environmental causes of health in communities served and how these relate to planetary environmental issues, such as malnutrition and food security.
Yeah, and I see, Jennifer, you put in the chat that you agree with Cornell that there's a low awareness and it should be integrated in undergrad and postgrad. Any elaborations on that, or how you think that we could do that?
I think, part of what you were saying that, there are always dangers when you have standalone modules. And so the challenge is, and I think there's an opportunity in our nursing curriculum that has also been, recurriculated, that we can link it, because it's such a primary care focused curriculum and follows, across the sort of the lifespan from the community to the hospital. I think there's a great opportunity to link it in the various areas in which they are covering. So, for example, you were sort of saying hunger issues to be, discuss that around issues around, child health, etc. Our students do a community engagement model because our students start in the community, and part of what they do in the community is that they have to do a community assessment. And I think, there, for example, making sure that the environmental determinants of health also get enough attention among all the other issues that we are looking at. So I think it's how we package it. And I think it sometimes becomes difficult to police because if it's a standalone module, you can actually ensure that the content is delivered. When it's integrated, it becomes more challenging, and you get to have a lot of champions teaching it to ensure that it is actually delivered in the right way. But I mean, I think that would be the way for us to go forward. And I'm pleased that my undergraduate staff and postgraduate teaching staff are on this presentation today. Thank you.
Great, thank you. There's just a couple more questions. The first ones were about the what, and now it's more about the how. So this one is about just recognising, as the AMI consensus statement tries to really emphasise, is that you don't have to create all of these materials from scratch, because there's so much available out there that is also free that you can just download and adapt for your own learners. So what is one source you know of to access teaching and learning materials that you can adapt for your learners and your context? So there's a Wonka short course on planetary health and the family doctor. Again, feel free to unmute. Have you used any like existing resources and adapted them for your own students? And can anybody recommend any sources?
Yeah, I think I might be interested to hear how, which sources Bob and Christian used or are using to develop the teaching material.
Yeah, hi, I'm unmuted. Yeah, so Christian actually did the Wonka short course on planetary health and the family doctor, and that I think is a very useful sort of set of materials. And then the other book that we've been using, I think it was put out by the Planetary Health Alliance, which is called Planetary Health, Protecting Nature to Protect Ourselves by Samuel Myers. That's also got a huge amount of very useful material in it. I think those are the two most important resources that we have been dipping into so far.
Yeah, and are you using from the book from Sam Myers? How do you kind of decide which information is most relevant for primary healthcare specifically, or even African continent? Is that something you consciously thought about while developing it?
Well, as I say, a lot of the teaching is yet to happen, but I mean, in that book, for example, and there's a lot of case studies. Some of them are, a lot of the information is from Africa, and so you can pick out things that are, you know, evidence that's coming from Africa. A lot of the issues are generic, you know, and we also actually, we've just put out a call in the African Primary Healthcare and Family Medicine Journal for the next 6 months for short reports on how climate change is impacting primary healthcare in Africa. So I'm also hopefully going to get a lot of good material from that. If we get, you know, 10 or 20 short reports from across the region, that would also provide a very good set of material from people, obviously, you know, working at the coalface, as it were. So that hopefully will become another good resource.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Bob. The person who put in SUSQI, could they explain how they use that? Because that's a really great method to mainstream climate change and health through the curriculum by taking a quality improvement lens.
Yeah, that's I put that in. I attended 2 courses earlier last year, I think it was, with the Centre for Sustainable Healthcare based in the UK on looking at quality improvement in the clinical setting and, you know, the principles of sustainability. And we have a colleague in the faculty here who offers an elective around quality improvement. And so my thinking with doing that was to integrate sustainability principles into that elective opportunity. They have a lot of resources, the CSH, and, you know, a lot of courses for clinicians and managers, I understand. Thank you.
Thanks, James. I've just got 2 more questions now. What is one thing you can do next to accelerate education for sustainable healthcare in your context? Is there something that needs to happen first? Do you need to wait for a certain window of a curriculum review or reviewing graduate attributes? Or is there something that you could do tomorrow, given the urgency?
Is this question as like a teacher or more like in general?
Well, it's anybody really. I suppose we're all educators, and that's kind of the context of the webinar. And sometimes there's things that we need to do as educators, because we have to also make sure that the changes that we make to the curriculum are also sustainable, that they don't depend on you, because some of our research also shows that we need climate champions to initiate this type of work, but then they leave and they've taken everything with them. So there's kind of a need to take a long-term view of the changes that you're making. So for example, if you can integrate a learning objective into the curriculum, then when you leave, that's something that will still need to be taught and will still need to be assessed. So this is maybe a bit more of an advocacy question. Yeah, and another example, like as I said before, of a change that you can make that will really have a big impact is making sure that it's in your graduate attributes or in your ethical, the ethical standards for your profession, or in some kind of practice guideline, and then it doesn't rely on you anymore. do a needs analysis using the Planetary Health Report Card to initiate conversations with faculty leaders and the UCT Office of Sustainability. Great. Visual issues. There was one other thing. Involve all undergraduate programs in the faculty. Yep. The other one is sometimes in universities, there might be a Centre for Sustainable Development, and in parallel, they may be offering these types of programs. So there's an opportunity there to collaborate sometimes.
I was also going to say something like that, Trish, but I think you stopped me mid-sentence when I was typing. I mean, at Stellenbosch, we've now developed this School for Climate Studies. So, so that now gives us the opportunity, for example, if we want to get somebody to talk to medical students about how do ecosystems, offer support to human health and well-being. You can actually get somebody from, another discipline, agriculture, or climate studies or whatever, to actually come in from another faculty and sort of make that connection in a more authoritative way for students than I could, So I think making those connections, interdisciplinary connections, will also accelerate and build the quality of the education, and because it's obviously all very interrelated.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, and I think in Ghent, we are right now developing a web-based tool for health science students and teachers, where they can actually play and kind of discover a little bit how the local and the global level connects. And the reason we're doing this is because, and that's like a more practical barrier, is that the curricula are often already full, and it's very difficult to kind of pitch the topic of planetary health as an additional topic in the curriculum of health science students who already have very packed curricula in general. And so I think that's also part of the discussion, I think, for a workshop like this as well, where could we integrate this into something, or do we want to develop a whole new course, or where exactly can we fit that in, where it can have the most impact. And so another interesting part there was that the consortium we're working with thought that the way to actually convince the health professionals also of the importance of this topic was to make them realize what their own impact actually is, and also their local environment, and try to really emphasize the local impact, because there was a bit of the thought process was that, yeah, climate change is often difficult to really understand. And so there might be a good approach here as well, where can we see a local impact of climate change? And depending the country where you teach it, this can obviously change. So really give local examples.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that was one of the 12 tips in that paper as well, to prioritize content for local relevance and professional utility as well, because health professionals are so practical.
So maybe I can exercise on what the impacts are on climate change on health per local region could be helpful as input also to design this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so just the last question, just so we can generate a word cloud, one word to describe how you feel about integrating climate change and sustainability into your teaching activities. And with that, I want to be conscious of everyone's time, because I think in 1 minute we're finishing up. So if you want to close, Charlotte, that's it from me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's very useful to have all these responses together. And so we're at the end of this workshop, and I think this was a good exercise to hear a little bit your perspectives on this topic. And so I think the next steps are indeed, like Cornell put in the chat, James has a special interest group of SAHI, and who are working on a sustainable education and education for sustainable healthcare. And I think it would be great for those here on the call, if you want to engage more on this topic, you could connect with James and with our group to think about this further and be part of this special interest group. I think so, James, right? If you want to say a few words on that.
Yes, sorry, thank you. I'll just put the link to that in the chat, and then I also just wanted to say that we've developed a position statement, and I wondered if now's the time to share that or just to refer people to that. It's a work in progress.
Yeah, I think because we're running over time, maybe if you're interested to work further on this with our group, please reach out to me and then I can connect you with. And our next step will be to actually evaluate the responses and that coming from the poll from Trish and in general, the workshop, and then see how we can move further with this information, maybe organize a next workshop or a next event to go a little bit more in depth on operationalization. So, and then the document that James shared in the chat is the position statement that we'd like to share with you and publish. And this is a way to more or less structure a little bit the process of developing planetary health education in Africa for primary care. So we're more or less a working group, but the intention is not to kind of create another interest group or another separate group. So that's why it's the invitation from James to join the existing group that he is involved with. But we do want to really use the information of today to work with concretely. So yeah, it was great to get everyone's input today. And we hope to hear you soon. And I will share a summary of our workshop. And if you want the recording of this workshop to share with your colleagues, please let me know and I can forward it to you. I'll put my email address again in the chat for further questions or requests. All right, that was it. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Bye-bye.